just in case people come early, there's nothing wrong with coming to a webinar a little early. You know what I mean? Overeager people.
I said we'll have to hop off on a call with Benny.
Who will have to?
I have to.
What
I have
time?
a call with just now, like 6:30.
Oh, you have to go?
Yeah. I'll
Okay,
hop
so
back
join.
in. Yep.
Okay, cool. People are here. Who's here? Let me see. Where does that list come in? Participants. Here we go. 5 people are here. Jared, we got Namir, we got Noah, Peter, Sean's AI note takers here. Sean's not here, but Sean's note takers here. So hello, the AI that represents Sean. Hi, Alex. Hi, Kareem. I know you. How you doing? Let's see. All right. Can everyone use the chat? Is the chat working? Just type something in the chat. There we go. Testing. Thank you, Peter. Appreciate that. So we'll give a few minutes to have a few more folks arrive, maybe like 12 to 15 folks, and then we can kick off. This is the first slide. You could type in where you are, if you do a lot of cold email or opt-in email or both. Use Google, use Microsoft, use some sort of other thing. Have any deliverability problems? Let's see. It's one of those days, guys. Hi, Josh. Josh filling in for Jared, cold email. Cool. Awesome. And cold email, yes, more and more emails landing in spam. The vaunted spam folder, that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the origins of this mysterious spam hole, where it all comes from. Hopefully I have time to answer everybody's questions. Cool. Just maybe like 2 more minutes, and then we can kick off. And if you have any questions about cold email stuff, anyone here, Alex, David, Jared, Kareem, Larry, Namir, Noah, Peter, Sheikh, anyone has questions? Oh, there you go, Jared. That's a lot. Reply.io, Folderly, Zoom info, and Never Bounce. Cool. So it's a stack. You got a stack going on. Cool. All that stuff makes sense. And the other folks here, anyone else want to answer these very rough questions? Where you are? No one's saying where you are. Come on, that's part of the fun. Because I'm in Brooklyn, New York. I guess I should have said that. I should probably have said that. I'm in Brooklyn, New York, just a few blocks away from the Williamsburg Bridge. Paris. Wow, that sounds nice. I could really go for a excellent croissant right now. You're using HubSpot. Okay, got it, Jared. So not a cold email outbound tool per se, more of part of a bigger suite. Peter's from Norway. Cool. Wow, that's great. Fresh client of senders. Love that. Bangladesh. Hi, Sheikh from Bangladesh. London. That's right. Cool. All right, let's kick off because, why not? Hi, Noah, Charlotte, North Carolina. That sounds cool. Newsletter, do some cold triage for ad sales. Yeah. ConvertKit and Apollo. Nice. No specific issues, always looking to improve. Cool. And using instantly, Shake. That sounds nice. Cool. All right. Well, welcome everyone. Today we are going to do a little history lesson. And we'll have time for Q&A, and we'll also talk about nuts and bolts of email deliverability. But sometimes I feel like the history gets forgotten. And if you understand the history a little bit better, it's actually a little bit easier to understand what's going on with the way Google's reacting to things, the way Microsoft's reacting to things, the way that things are happening. There's a lot of baggage in the email space, a lot more baggage than people usually imagine there is. So today we're going to sort of skim the surface of what that baggage is and talk about the effects that it has on modern day email deliverability. So I like to start these presentations by just asking the simple question of how deep down the email deliverability rabbit hole has someone gone. And I use this slide to give some context. So I'm the CEO and founder of a company called Senders. And Senders sends a lot of cold email on behalf of clients. So we're a full puzzle email deliverability and sendability service. So we look at and care about and work on the complete picture of email deliverability for companies, usually right now between 70 and 80 B2B companies, most of them venture backed. And that covers cold email for sales purposes, corporate email, marketing email, transactional email. But really, cold email is the hard one. And cold email is the thing that most closely resembles actual spam. So by talking about spam email, in some ways, we're actually kind of talking about cold email, even though that's not really the purpose of the emails. We're not trying to do anything bad with them. So Senders has sent around 30 million cold emails in the last 12 months alone. So we don't give advice that's theoretical. We give advice based specifically on what we do. But also a lot of our advice is sort of advanced. It's very hard to replicate on your own. And that means that we have a lot of enemies because the sort of DIY community goes, well, I can't do that. So you must be doing something wrong. I was like, well, I'm not doing something wrong. We're actually experts at this and we invest a lot in it. So we have technicians on our team that deal with stuff. I'm the CEO and founder. I'm more of like a spokesperson in a sense. I know a lot about email deliverability, but I don't actually dig too much in the technical nitty gritty of it. I have a whole team for that. So, but today on the webinar, we're going to talk about sort of the past, present, and future of cold emailing and dig into some details. And hopefully today can be one of the days where your rabbit hole digging ends. That'd be nice, right? All right. So the presentation is called Cold Email Past, Present, Future, and what it all means for email deliverability. So we're going to cover a lot of ground pretty quickly, decades at a time. We're going to skip over a lot of details, hopefully fill out the picture in a sort of useful way. As is customary, we're going to start with the past. And we're going to be focusing today mainly on pharma spam, which is pharmaceutical spam, people trying to sell illegal drugs over the internet, which, as we'll see when we go through the history, became more and more of a problem and now is much less of a problem. But all the problems that the pharma spammers created these defense mechanisms, these spam walls that we're still dealing with today. Pharma spam is particular interest of me for a bunch of reasons. One, from the perspective of the spammers, so the people who were sending the emails with the pharma spam in them, they were actually running what they saw as a legitimate business. That might sound crazy, it might sound weird. They weren't actually trying to steal people's money. They were trying to connect consumers with illegal pharmacies who would send legitimate drugs to that person. So is it illegal? Yes. But is it completely off the wall, nefarious, ransomware type things? No. The second part is it was clear from the spammers' perspective that while what they're doing was illegal, the product was actually wanted. So there were a large number of people who were looking for illegal pharmaceuticals. They were prescribed a medicine from the doctor they couldn't afford because of the American healthcare system. So they get told about a legal pharmacy that will sell to them for really, really cheap from Canada or India or something. And so they were seeking that out. So from the spammers' perspective, they could see that there were consumers out there trying to buy, and it was very competitive in that way. And what we'll also find talking about pharma spam is the whole thing was really toppled by a combination of government action and the major tech companies taking action. Google and Microsoft and others, mainly Microsoft, but Google and Microsoft taking action. So what we see is the rise of the defenses against pharma spam correspond directly with the email environment on a whole getting harder, even for cold emailers. And you'll see that almost all of the major changes in the way email functions are a result of big tech and government interacting with each other to fend off actual spammers. And in a certain sense, not hurting, but making it a lot harder for legitimate emailers to do the legitimate email. Whether you consider cold email legitimate or illegitimate, most people on this call probably see it as legitimate. It is legal. The spam laws allow for it. Okay, so before we dig into the modern history, let's talk about prehistory. The first spam email ever sent was in 1978. It was to advertise a new model of email, a new model of a computer. And it was sent to something like 300 recipients on ARPANET, which predates the internet. This basically set the stage for the spam problem. We have the only defense that ARPANET really had was that apparently they called and yelled at this person. But if you look at the actual email itself, this is the actual email. If you look at the screen now, you'll see it. It's a cold email. It's a legitimate business solicitation email for a real company selling a real product. It isn't garbage. It isn't actually nefarious in any way. And apparently it was very effective. So you can see that the roots of this actually are commercial, not illegal in any way. So fast forward to the 1990s, email gained a lot of popularity, and the birth of the modern spam movement. The early emails were very unsophisticated. They're mostly get rich quick schemes, miracle cures, pharmaceutical products were part of the mix. They weren't the dominant thing though. The strategy was really simple. You send out millions of these emails and hope that a tiny percentage of people respond or click or do something. And there were very few defenses. AOL had some early defense mechanisms built in. Maybe there was some filtration, but nothing really serious. So spam would come in, people would see it, they would archive it or whatever. In the early 2000s, you saw the rise of pharma spam. And the early 2000s had a big shift in the spam landscape. Now, early 2000s means 20 plus years ago now, so there's been a lot of time since then. But early in the 2000s, spammers found a niche with pharmaceutical products for the reasons that I described earlier. And suddenly, inboxes were flooded with offers for lifestyle drugs like Viagra and other things like that. There was also a technical evolution here. Spammers began using HTML emails with images and fake branding in them. So they were sort of doing more imitation of other types of companies to make it look a little bit more legitimate. So there's more images. They can mimic the branding of legitimate companies, making their messages a little bit more convincing. Like, is this real? Did I sign up for this? I'm not sure, but let me investigate this. The mid 2000s spam filter arms race really starts. So it had become such a big problem in the mid 2000s that major email providers like Yahoo, Hotmail, Gmail started investing very heavily in spam filters. So they saw it as a problem with their user base. Their user base couldn't use their email very effectively and properly because there was so much spam. The spammers didn't give up, though, of course. This is where spammers got really intense with their tactics. So this is where they started to embed text in images to avoid detection, because they knew that the filtration from Yahoo and Hotmail and Gmail weren't as good at reading text that was inside an image. This is where they started to use special characters to disguise URLs. And this is where a constant back and forth started, each one trying to outsmart the other. The late 2000s, early 2010s saw spam reach an unprecedented level, probably a level that in the early 2000s, Google's and Microsoft's could never imagine. Basically, what happened was hackers realized that they could use botnets to infect computers and use those botnets, use these infected computers to send spam email. And so we saw email spam get into the tens of billions a day level. And this is where the Can Spam Act and other things started to ramp up to try to make it explicitly illegal for this kind of activity, which gives governments a reason to put pressure on other companies and other governments to tamp down on it. But the volume of spam is incredible during this era. So in 2010s, things sort of make a change. And the reason why this change is important is Originally, the volume of spam was the problem. But when it comes to ransomware, the shift is more targeted emails that are meant to be used to manipulate the recipient. So it's a little bit more sinister. So the pharmaceutical spam continued because there was still money to be made, although less and less. But instead of trying to sell people fake products, cyber criminals focused on like getting people to click on things to hold data hostage. Malware like CryptoLocker, WannaCry, these are globally scaled attacks that were being done. And all of the email service providers started to build or double their defenses against this particular kind of attack, which has knock-on effects of all the other systems that they're using. Late 2000s, early 2020s, this is where a different kind of attack started to happen, which is what you call a business email compromise attack. This is where you impersonate a high-up person in the company. And by impersonating them, you can trick employees into giving information or giving access. So these are much more targeted, much more personalized. So they do a lot more research and they figure out how to orchestrate these attacks much more detailed. And again, this has an effect on the way that Microsoft and Google and these companies are using and building their defenses, because now it's a little bit of a different strategy. And then we get into the 2020s, which we're in now, which is a culmination of decades of spam evolution. Phishing attacks are very sophisticated. Spear phishing, individual targets, is using personal information, is much more intense. That will probably intensify with AI. We're seeing phishing as a service. So companies are out there just selling access to companies that they've already phished, and on and on. And we're also seeing hybrid attacks. So people are doing malicious things that are a combination of bad things to further some sort of bad goal. So it might be something like using a botnet to flood someone's inbox, meanwhile doing something else to pretend to be someone that's coming to fix the flooding of the inbox, leading to, which results in the attack being done. So companies like Google and Microsoft are trying to thwart these multi-pronged attacks that use elements of previous styles of attacks all wrapped into one. That very quick history. Any questions on this particular history part? Feel free to drop it in the chat. So throughout this whole time, compliance, both on a government level with the CAN-SPAM Act and on the email service provider level, like what Google and Microsoft are doing and others, starts to ramp up. We see the CAN-SPAM Act in 2003, SPF, DMARC, and DKIM, which all seem like gospel, like they've been there forever, actually only came about from 2004, 2007, and 2012. Then we have the rules around GDPR and CCPA and other rules like that. This is an incomplete list, and this only talks about the actual high-level compliance. It doesn't talk about the things that Google and Microsoft have done to limit cold email sending or access and limits inside their own networks, which in some ways most directly affect the way cold emailers are operating now. But all of these things are basically a response to the different kinds, forms, functions of spam. And now we don't just have spam inboxes that are defending against one type, they're defending against 3, 4, 5 types. And each one of those makes it incrementally harder for a simple cold emailer to do the cold email that they want to do. So that brings us to the present. So it's in this present that cold email starts to rise as a viable growth channel. And we're dealing with all of the negative effects of spammers and the government's reaction and Google's reaction from all these decades past. So cold email itself is still very simple. There's still only 4 elements of email that are under our control, which is domains, IPs, the DNS records, and the actual way that email is being used. But more and more cold emailers are acting like spammers of the past. And that's one of my motivations for making this presentation, is to talk about the specifics of the things that they're doing actually very, very closely resemble what spammers of the past were doing. So an example of that is, remember, if you go back to this list, we have domains, IPs, and DNS and email usage. We can skip DNS because that's a little bit too in the weeds. But if you think about it, by using multiple domains really quickly, that's oftentimes called snowshoeing domains, where you move from one domain to the next as one domain gets burned. That's a technique that spammers invented a long time ago. Now that has come to the fore, and it's what cold emailers are doing by and large. We don't do that at senders, but cold emailers are doing in order to get around email limits. They're evading email service providers' limits they place on it by doing multiple Google Workspace accounts. That's also a technique that spammers used to use a lot. You buy really cheap hundreds of email accounts and use them all to send a few number of emails, coordinating them by using some sort of network. That's what cold emailers have started to do in recent time. Warming tools, which have benefits, look a lot like bot farms. They look a lot like someone else taking control of an email in order to send. And that makes people like Google and Microsoft nervous, because you're seeing a coordination of emails that are not being operated by a human being. Email subject lines are getting subtly more deceptive. You're seeing more people say things that are a little bit deceptive, which technically goes against the CAN Spam Act. We're seeing a rise in cold emailers making fake people, whether they're AI driven or whatever, to do the sending. And fake people, you're not actually allowed to send as a fake person. That's not legal according to the CAN Spam Act, but they're doing it more and more. So all these things are just sort of enhancing, turning cold email more and more into what it looks like spammers were doing, albeit on a much smaller scale. I think the scale matters a lot less now. And the reason why the scale matters a lot less is that in the past, the volume was the main thing, and now it's the spear phishing type things that are the most effective for actual criminals. So they're actually imitating spammers of the past in a way that looks a lot more like spammers of the present are actually doing it. So all this, I believe, is pretty odd, and it's also pretty dangerous. It's odd because almost none of this stuff that we're talking about is necessary. You could see this as a little bit of a pitch about what Senders does, but cold email functions perfectly fine without doing anything that even remotely looks like spam. You can follow the letter of the law for the spam rules, have a single domain or very few domains sending a high volume of emails. We do up to 4,000 emails a day or even more from a single domain without any issues. You don't need lots of Google Workspace accounts, or you don't even need a lot of IP infrastructure in order to do a high volume of cold emailing, because cold email isn't illegal. It's a legitimate form of business communication according to the law. So it's odd because you don't need any of this stuff, but it's being used a lot. And it's dangerous because I think the future of cold email will largely be dictated by big government action and big tech. And those two groups are largely reactionary. So if cold emailers are increasingly creating the kind of pressure on those organizations that gets reactions from those players, you might actually see action that will kind of end the game of cold email, or at least make it even more hard, even harder than it's already become. So let's do a quick review, and then we'll bring it back to the present, and then we can launch into a Q&A about details or whatever we want to talk about. So I said that pharma spam is a particular interest to me because it has a lot of similarities to regular business email, although regular business cold email is legal and what the pharma spammers are doing is illegal. They think they're doing something legitimate. Cold email senders think they're doing something legitimate. They feel like they have a place in the inbox. You're optimizing for engagement, which is very similar to what the pharma spammers were doing. And Google and Microsoft are reacting directly to the pressures being put on the recipient by these actions, whether or not they're illegal. So I think that as long as cold email can sustain the current odd equilibrium where cold email stays within legal bounds and doesn't annoy, bother, or create a big reaction from government and tech, it should continue as it is for a while. If you see anything that disrupts that equilibrium, I think we'll find that cold emailers poke the bear one too many times or five too many times, and we'll see a big, swift reaction from the email police in the form of government action or big tech action, which will make it nearly impossible for cold email to continue as it is. That's all the prepared remarks. Any questions? I know it's a little bit doom and gloom. Usually we try to keep these things a little brighter and happier. But I'll open up to the floor to any questions. And while you are all formulating your questions, I brought a technician from my team here, Dame. Dame, do you have any thoughts, any comments on specific actions you're seeing folks do, or any comments on the most recent changes that Google's made in terms of open tracking or anything like that you want to share?
Yeah, in short, I would I would just say don't
This
use
is
open
Dame from our
tracking.
team, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not an AI, I'm an actual person. And I would say like don't
Are you
use
sure? That's
open
exactly what an
tracking.
AI would say.
Yeah, well, it's up to you to find out. But yeah, to make it a little bit more clear, I'm gonna repeat it again. Ideally, you should not be focusing on open tracking at all and disabling it because it's just gonna cause negative feelings when someone, even though your email is landing in someone's inbox, they will see a message of images being hidden and those types of things. So I would just stay away from tracking pixels altogether.
Yeah, and I think that we're seeing one of the most recent. Josh, we'll get to your question in a second. One of the most recent updates that we've seen that Google has made is they're not loading images by default for many users anymore. So in other words, when you get an email, they're making you click a button to show the images, and current open tracking is done with a very tiny picture, and the picture gets opened, and that's how you know someone opened it. And by Google saying, hey, we're not allowing that, it actually makes it harder for you to track opens anyway. So by removing open tracking now, you're potentially avoiding a flag that goes across the top of their email, making it harder for them to read your email, if that makes sense. So Josh has asked, are you using private servers to run 4,000 emails on a single domain? And are you still using Google Microsoft at all for sending? So we have not used Google or Microsoft for sending even a single email since the year 2000. And part of the thing that was happening, we're seeing a continuation of it. But when I started doing cold email professionally in 2016, that's when I started Senders. But before that, I was even doing it 2012, 2013. 2016, you could send 400 emails a day from a new Google Workspace account, new email address without any problem on day one. And you could even go much further, much higher. We saw people sending as many as 2,000 emails a day from a single email address without any issue. By the year 2020, that was down to 100 emails a day. Anyone who's trying to do this now knows currently it's down to 20 emails a day or even less. Sometimes you get suspended before you even send a single email. So around 2020, my team said, well, this doesn't make any sense. Let's take email apart and let's reconstruct it in a way that allows us to send more emails for our clients in a much more controlled way. So the sort of answer to the question is all of the elements of what we're doing are under our control at Senders. The IP addresses are under our control. The IMAP servers that are routing the emails are under our control. The domains are under control of the clients, but the DNS records are under our control. The age of the domain that's sending it, how old the domain is under our control. What clients are sending, making sure they're not sending things that negatively affect our IP addresses or make it unlikely for them to get through or under our control. Investigating all of the bounce backs that happen and the recipient servers are under our control. Whether we own the software, we're using someone else's software is sort of irrelevant because email itself, as I mentioned, is actually very, very straightforward. But yes, now the idea that a single email can't send, a single domain can't send a lot of email is it's sort of, you only have to look at your own inbox to understand that the vast majority of companies in the world that are sending millions, tens of millions of emails a day, or even an hour, or even a minute, are all using single domains to send those emails. So there really is no factual basis that a single domain can't send way more than 4,000 emails, 40,000 emails, 400,000, 4 million emails. In fact, most large companies that do a tremendous volume of email only have 1 or 2 emails that they send from in total. I think UPS maybe has like 4 or 5 emails in total. Any follow-up questions on that, Josh? And anyone else here? It's sort of interesting that we became a little bit, people are generally confused that companies like Senders exists and that we send a lot of emails from very few domains. But we're actually feel exactly the opposite, that we're also very confused that people are using dozens and dozens of domains in order to send emails. So it's a common thing that we're asked about, and I'm happy to answer more questions about it. What email service provider do you use in that case? We do not use an email service provider. That's the sort of short answer.
For clarify, we kind of act like an email service provider.
Yeah, we basically act like an email service provider. Now, keep in mind that email service providers are a bundle of services. They're providing access to IPs. They're providing an inbox infrastructure, a place to write emails and draft them, and sort of, they're also producing a place to receive emails that get sent to you. And they bundled all this stuff together, and they made a really friendly, easy way to interact with it. If you unbundle them, you end up with IP addresses that can be accessed through something like Mailgun or something like that has like IP addresses in it. You need a way to send the emails. You need a way to constitute an email address that's sending from those IP addresses. Then you need a way to receive the emails and route them to some sort of email interface where you read them. So we sort of put all these pieces out on the table, including the warming and other stuff that now we find is required in order to keep sending ratios healthy enough to keep email going. And we lay them all out, and then we use whatever service is best for the situation that we're doing it in. In some cases, it's shared IPs. Some cases it's pools of IPs. Some cases it's moving IPs around, keeping IP addresses healthy, rotating them. But we typically find it takes tens of millions of emails, at least 1 million emails, to warm an IP address and keep it really active and healthy. So there's lots of email traffic that we're passing between clients and trying to understand how to make it and keep it healthy. Any other questions? Any specific questions about? Cool, Jared. Thanks. I'm glad that makes total sense. I think it's one of these things where the spirit of the internet these days is people somehow expect to hear advice that they can immediately take and use. And it's just one of these things where the technicalities of email is such that it's actually not a lot of fun to do this on your own. And there are not that many shortcuts. And anything that kind of looks like a shortcut oftentimes is a short-term thing. So shortcuts tend to be short-term. Like, for example, you spin up a new domain and you start blasting emails. You might send okay for 1,000 emails or 2,000 emails, but the half-life is very short. It'll decline very rapidly in quality. And that's because you can see from the history of spam that if you're snowshoeing and you're a spammer, you grab a new domain, you spin it up, a new email address, you blast as fast as you can. You're not expecting that to last very long. So then you move on to the next one. And because that short-termness means that email recipients all across the world know that if someone's sending a lot of emails in a short period of time, they're up to no good, especially if it's new. So then they seek to move to stop you. So one of the secret weapons of Senders is that when we work with clients, we're talking about aged domains. Another secret weapon of Senders is that when we're sending emails on behalf of clients, we're sending from really warm IP addresses, not just the email provider said, oh, or the SMTP provider said, oh, these are warm. But we actually know that they're warm because of the volume of emails, and we've been stress testing them all the way through, et cetera, down the line, if that makes sense. So sadly, it's not just such an easy quick fix type thing. Any other questions, comments, concerns? We got 20 participants now here, I think, which is pretty good. Q&A. Oh, there's a question. Did I miss? Yes. What's the question? I'm seeing in the chat. My own team is sending me notes. Is it good practice to redirect cold email domain to the main domain? So this gets a little bit. So the question is, I'm going to assume the question is, if you have a cold email domain, let's say it's emailsenders.co, and our main domain is senders.co, is it a good idea to have emailsenders.co when you access that domain directly, even though that domain isn't being used for your main domain, to redirect to your main domain? I would argue yes. The reason why I would argue yes is if you're an email service provider, you're receiving emails. What you want is visibility into something authentic. In other words, if the ultimate destination is a non-existent website that doesn't give the email service provider confidence that the person sending the email is legitimate. If the ultimate destination is senders.co, which is just a website like any other website that, looks like something, even if it passes through in that way, look at all these people competing against senders.com, senders.co. So funny. Even if the email is passing through all the way to here, it at least says, okay, the person's sending from email.senders.co, but when I pass it all the way through, it goes to here, which means that there isn't something nefarious happening where they're actually redirecting it to something that's unrelated to senders, or it's not someone pretending to be senders, which is called spoofing, where you pretend to be someone that you're not. That increases the confidence in the email service provider that the email is legitimate. But that's on the email service provider side. From the perspective of the recipient, disconnects between the domain and the sender for someone that is critical of their email and worried about phishing attacks, that looks really weird. They go, well, why is someone from senders sending me an email from emailsenders.co or email.senders.co? Something weird is happening. Well, email.senders.co is a subdomain. It's a little bit different, but emailsenders.co, that would be weird. So I would say that it's probably better to have it redirect than not. Folks who are telling you a story about how you have cold email over here and it doesn't connect at all to your main domain, and that's what gives you protection, probably haven't really thought through how sophisticated spam filtration systems are. And with that lack of sophistication, it fundamentally means that they're not thinking through as deeply as the spam filters are. And all the things that seem like shortcuts or seem like they're not fully thought through tend to just shorten the lifespan of the domain health in a certain sense, if that makes sense. Hold on one second. I don't know how to get back to my presentation. I'll just turn it off for a second. Let's see. Cool. All right. Hi, Jared. Thanks for another question. I'm just going to take 1 second and get back to my presentation, because there was still some stuff there worth talking through. Just give me 1 second, guys. All right. Got it back now. Okay. So your biggest challenge is having 100% verified data, even when using the tools to create a best case scenario. What do you use to find data on ICP? Data is never going to be 100% no matter what tools you're using. And data is almost completely a commodity. When I say it's a commodity, I mean that Benny at senders.co is the same whether you find it in Apollo.io's database, ZoomInfo's database, or any database out there. So the source of the data is less important than you verifying the data. And the verification of data means you're running it through software that's designed to try to sort out what's going to bounce, what's a catch-all email address, et cetera. So you're always going to have a certain amount of bounces anyway, because the recipient email server gets to decide if they deliver the email or not, even if it's a valid sender. That is to say that emails that get sent to me, even if it's sent to Benny at senders.co, if there's something about the email not worth delivering, it's possible that Google, who's our email service provider for our regular day-to-day email, just might not deliver it. They literally might just make it disappear. And if it's in the case of Google, they won't even tell you that they made it disappear. They just will make it disappear. So there's no way to guarantee you're going to get 100% deliverability anyway, even if the data is very, very high quality, if that makes sense. But Apollo.io is a good data source. ZoomInfo is probably a good data source, even though we don't use ZoomInfo. And then there are dozens of others that I think probably do a pretty decent job. Jared, how is that affecting your deliverability? Do you feel like it's negatively affecting it? You've used Apollo and now you ZoomInfo, and you switched from Apollo to ZoomInfo because you thought the data quality was better, or was the ICP much bigger in ZoomInfo, like they had more people? Yeah. Dami, do you want to talk a little bit about how you think about data verification and the sources of bounces, at least for in the case of most of our clients? Oh, the dialing was better. Yeah, that makes sense. You're talking about for cell numbers and things like that. I could understand how there would be a difference in data quality based on the provider for numbers, especially because people have multiple phone numbers, main switchboard versus others.
Well, as far as like getting like 100% verified data, that's almost impossible. So what we've noticed that even when we use, yeah, and it always happens that you get like a bounce or so. But as long as you keep that bounce rate below 5%, I would say that you're in a good place. But here's the thing, depends on what you use for sending. Verification should be done occasionally as well. Like if you have scraped, let's say 5,000 leads, but you have only sent 2,000 within that month, the next month it's also ideal to re-verify those remaining two or 3,000 before you send them, or like you say, verify them just before used. Yeah, that would also make a good strategy.
I think that we don't really, folks don't talk too much about what email verification actually is, like what it's actually doing on a technical level, but it's kind of doing, it's kind of almost like a prank call where imagine you're well, it's actually really tough because I don't know the ages of all the people here, but back in my day, when I was a kid, you'd have a landline phone and there would be, let's imagine that you were trying to contact a girl, and the girl had a really scary father and the father didn't like you. So you'd call and you'd hope that the girl would pick up the phone. And if she didn't, you'd hang up. That's sort of like what these email verification systems are doing. They're knocking on the door. They're calling up saying like, hey, is there a Benny at senders.co here? And they're like, yeah. And then they hang up the phone and they don't send the email. They don't finish the project of sending an email because they're not actually emailing. They're just sort of opening the door and seeing what happens. So it's actually very easy for email systems to give false positives to the verifiers, even though, there's actually no one to deliver that email to. And then there's, of course, catch-all email systems, which are email systems that receive all the emails before they distribute them. So it doesn't surprise me that much that anywhere from 1% to 5% or even more of the emails will have some sort of problem. And then, of course, another thing to make sure you understand, Jared, about these things is most of these systems are layered. It's sort of like if you go through a security at the airport, the security for the airport actually starts the second you get into the ramp that leads to the airport. And then there are police officers and other people that are monitoring the cars before they stop. And then you walk through the doors of the airport, and those doors are also security doors. And then you get to the TSA people, and then you get, and then you get, and then you get. So email also is all these layers. So it's totally possible that if you ask if someone exists using the email verification system, the response is yes. But your email gets stopped by Proofpoint, Mimecast, or some other layer in the stack that doesn't let the email through, and maybe does you a favor by sending a note back saying we didn't deliver this. But largely, there's other layers in the stack that can deny an email getting delivered, even if the email itself is completely valid in every single way. So it's good to understand that. And it's also good to understand that most of those email systems aren't going to do serious damage to your email sending, as long as Dame said, the volume of them is low. Because if you think about it, if you're getting a certain percentage of bounces, even though the email is valid, so are all of the biggest retailers in the world that are sending emails out on a daily basis, millions and millions of emails. They're also getting a certain number of bounces from things, people changing email addresses, shutting it down, or doing whatever that makes the email not be delivered. Okay, cool. And of course, Jared, one thing to mention is DNS records can matter. In other words, if you might get a lot of emails delivered if your SPF, DMARC, and DKIM are in okay condition, but if there's anything wrong with them, a lot of your emails will still be delivered, but a certain portion of them won't be delivered. So it makes sense to make sure your SPF, DMARC, and DKIM are perfectly in order and they're aligned properly for delivery. Okay, Shake says use a manual VA to get the quality data. That's cool. Lead Valis. Cool. That's great. That's good advice. I've never used that tool, but it sounds like a good one. Could be worth trying for other folks here if it makes sense. Thanks for the input, Shake. Appreciate it. So Kareem, the problem with sending on a technical level, yes, you could send a test email to an email address from a burner email address. There are services that just do that. There are issues and problems with the services. Dami, what's the name of that burner email service that we know about? I'm forgetting.
Yeah, I forgot as well.
Kareem, we can get you information on one. The reason why most folks don't use a burner email structure where you send a fake email is that, one, the burner email could actually have deliverability problems. So you're getting a bounce back even though you think it's going to be delivered. So that's one thing. The second thing that can happen is it dramatically increases the cost per send. So in your case, Kareem, you're not sending at a high volume, a crazy high volume. So you might be able to justify the cost, but it might cost you anywhere from a penny to 10 cents just to send the fake email that then tells you if it's going to be delivered or not. And then of course, the actual quality of the send matters a lot. So if the IP addresses of the company or whatever that's doing the fake send, if those get rejected, then you end up thinking it's not going to be delivered, which I think I said the same thing twice. So I'm aware of that. Let's see. Do you think that opt-out headers are necessary? Should we use an opt-out link in the email or just plain text? Use MX Toolbox. Forgot to mention that for the DNS side. Well, MX Toolbox is giving you an indication of whether your DNS records are configured properly, but which is a fine tool and it does what it's supposed to do. There are weaknesses with any given tool. The question about opt-out headers is an important one. On a compliance level, you have to have an opt-out function that works. It has to function properly. That's what the law says. And an unsubscribed link is the most efficient way to do it. And actually getting people to unsubscribe by clicking a link is way more efficient than making them reply to unsubscribe, because that requires effort. And it's probably even easier for them to click spam button. So you don't provide an unsubscribe link. They're going to use one click on you. That one click is going to be spam, which is going to increase the spam report rate, which is going to hurt your deliverability way more than them clicking unsubscribe. I would advocate for, and we advocate for all of our clients, and we require all of our clients to use an unsubscribe link. The unsubscribe link is your best defense against being marked as spam, in my opinion. Cool. So let's see. Should we host our domains inside Cloudflare for cold email domains? Does it help in any way? I don't think that the registrar matters a lot in a positive sense. In a negative sense, there is something to be said for low quality email registrars could have a negative effect on your, not email registrars, low quality registrars could have a negative effect. So believe it or not, there are registrars, meaning the places you buy domains, that are poorly run and have very poor security, and might even be selling domains to people who host really bad things on the internet. And they might be looked at negatively by email recipient servers. I don't know to what extent it matters, but there is a world in which it does matter. I think that Cloudflare is a legitimate option. GoDaddy is probably a legitimate option. And most of the ones that you consider, even domains in seconds, is probably okay, et cetera, et cetera. But as you get further and further away from the mainstream, and you start to get ones that are in distant countries that have poor security, you might end up in a situation where your domain registrar is the problem. But Cloudflare is a good option. Tend to find. Okay, let's see. Oh, I feel like I missed some questions or something. I don't know. Hey, Og, where does this mention of Maildoso come in? Is that a question I just missed somewhere? All right. Let's see. There's a question. We've used ZoomInfo, Seamless, or Apollo over the last few years, and Zoom and Seamless are about the same, or survey on clicks. And Apollo with a smaller sample size significantly higher. Well, I'm not sure who asked that question, but the so Jared says that one click won't. Namecheap seems to be okay. Dame, what do you think about Namecheap?
Yeah, it is an okay provider.
I think that, I know this sounds funny to say it, which is Kareem, which is funny. If you've sort of heard of it, it's probably okay. I think if you go really deep into things, you start to find domain registrars that you've just never heard of ever, and those might be the ones that are doing shady things. So probably okay if you just bought it in a sort of regular way. Okay,
I just want to touch point for Jared's question about the one-click unsubscribe and the opt-out link. It depends on the volume you're sending. As far as the one-click unsubscribe thing, if you're sending more than 5,000 emails a day, that's a requirement. But if it's less than that, you can basically disable that part. As far as having like an opt-out link in the email, I would rather have that than have people mark me as spam. That's my suggestion.
Cool. Yeah, that makes sense. And Dami, do you want to talk about the difference between unsubscribe link and an opt-out header?
I mean, it's the opt-out header thing is been like a requirement for from Google. It's not a super new thing, but lately they are pushing to it, especially for the higher volume senders. It's basically, if anyone has seen that thing when you open a Gmail, an email that you have received on Gmail, it has an option to unsubscribe, and that comes with the one-click unsubscribe header and the list management header as well, which is a requirement. What else should I say about it? There isn't much really. Basically, it's only a requirement if you're sending 5,000 emails and above for now. But it's not triggering any, let's say, like making the email look funny or spammy or something like that. It just it's an okay thing to have at the end of the day. Again, as I said, I much rather have people unsubscribe than mark my email as spam. So there's that.
So the sort of rumor mill, the cold email rumor mill always says things like, oh, it's if you have an unsubscribe link in your email, then that's going to tell the spam filters to filter you out or something like that. I think that largely most of those things are pretty unfounded. In other words, there's no real data to support those kinds of suppositions, those ideas. In fact, an unsubscribe link that functions properly probably is one of your best defenses against large scale damage to your domain, simply because the fact that a spam report, especially from Google, matters a tremendous amount. It matters so much that, you know, if you have 3 out of 1,000 emails marked as spam, Google threatens to shut your whole thing down. So it just shows you the sort of negative effect it can have. 1,000 per day per domain, including warmups. Yeah. That's a reasonable number of emails. Hopefully it's working well for you, and you're not emailing to gmail.com email addresses too much or at all, because those ones tend to be more sensitive. There's a question apparently from Inga around Maildoso. I can't find the question, but I think it makes sense to touch briefly on something like Maildoso, and there are other services that are somewhat similar to it. On a very basic level, what those companies are doing is they're creating an alternate bundle of IP addresses and domains and things like that than you would find from something like a Google or whatever. The devil really is in the details with any of these systems. They tell you our IP addresses are in great shape. This is amazing, no problem. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. They sell you lots of domains. So they're sort of implying that you need lots of domains in order to do lots of sending. They limit you in all these ways that work in the way they do. I don't know. You know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But at the same time, we work with a lot of companies where on a compliance level, the idea of having even 2 or 3 extra domains that are not the main domain, or let alone 20 or 30, is a problem. And having lots of these little pieces that all must connect to and instantly isn't really viable. For example, a lot of our clients use outreach.io, and outreach.io doesn't even allow, I don't even think they allow 2 domains to be connected to a single account. So how could you run a play where you're sending emails from dozens and dozens of domains? It doesn't really make any sense. So I would say that you should look skeptically at any claim, including the claims that we make, and look skeptically at the approach and make sure that it is sound. But I'm not here to tell anyone that what they're going to try to do with another service provider is inherently bad in any way. I wouldn't recommend it, because I would prefer people work with us than work with others. Cool. I think we're right at time. Let's see, why don't we do this? If anyone has any questions about their own DNS records, or has any questions about their own setup or any issues, we're happy to do one-on-ones with anyone that would like. So just, you know, raise a hand or just say, sure, I'd be open to it. And I think we have most of your email addresses because you all registered for this, so we can do that. Happy to, for you, Jared, if you do want someone to look at anything, Dame on our team can set up a time with you, no problem. I know that some of you are considering working with senders. So if this sparks more questions, feel free to reach out to whoever you're talking with about it. And yeah, thanks everyone for joining. Yeah, Jared, you can grab a time right there on Dame's calendar. I think once I turn this off, that disappears. It's a magical disappearing link. So we'll give it 1 more minute for anyone that wants to book a time with Dame. Dame is not a salesperson, FYI. He's a technician. So you don't have to worry about necessarily being sold to anything. He'll help you look at whatever you need. Let's see, hold on. Can we create a subdomain out of a main domain and create mailboxes to use them as cold email sender email? Yes, that is possible for sure. if a subdomain gets blacklisted, does it negatively affect the main domain? Some email recipient servers have it affect the main domain and some don't, but it's usually a much smaller percentage. So it creates a nice buffer against the main domain being blacklisted. The issue, of course, is that blacklisting is a downstream effect of something bad already happening. In other words, it creates a negative cycle where you get added to a blacklist and now other people see it on the blacklist and then it gets worse and worse from there. So, but also blacklists tend to cycle very quickly. Some of them only last, a week or 10 days or something, and then you're already off the blacklist. They're sort of temporary bans or temporary blocks. And then also a lot of email servers, recipient servers, treat subdomains different from main domains as well. So I think subdomains are a good option. And if you look in your own inbox, you'll see that a lot of the major email senders, whether they're email newsletters, e-commerce brands, or whatever, use subdomains as well for a similar purpose. Cool. All right. Thanks, everyone. This was really fun. Well, it was fun for me, at least. Hope it was useful for you. Let me know. Feel free to send any comments, questions, etc. Let's see. Yeah, here's my info. Benny@senders.co. You can email me or you can email Chris Lee, who's our director of revenue. And Dame is Dame, D-A-M-E, @senders.co as well. Thanks, everyone. Bye for now.